Good morning, good morning, good morning. Love McNeil, good morning. Happy Friday. Yes, it is. It's a fantastic Friday. Super pumped to be here. Really bummed a little bit late because I'm trying to get this camera to work again, but I really just need to go ahead and buy a camera that's actually intended on plugging directly into your computer and doing these live streams with, rather than trying to get this one to work every day. And clearly, it doesn't want to. So I was very optimistic because as I was in here yesterday, I got it to work, but it seems to be a very temperamental thing. But that is all right. We are here. Let's go ahead and get set up. Post your questions in the chat if you have any. Download the Ingram Rental Calculator app. I haven't talked about that in a while. Still a huge fan of it, and I stand behind it. But mainly, I need to get this disclaimer rolling because if you have any questions, I'm going to answer them, but they are just my opinion alone, and they are not professional advice whatsoever. So you should always consult someone that actually knows what they're talking about before you go ahead and make any decisions. Let's see. Good morning. Posting questions in the chat. Let's see what I've got going on today. We are closing on 3 properties today. So it's really good. Very happy about that. But that is lower than we have been closing on. But also still a great movement forward. So currently, so far for the year, we have closed 31 properties. And after today, we'll be right at 34. So in order to be on pace to actually purchase 200 properties this year, it needs to be about 17 per month. So we are almost in the middle of March and we have hit 34, which means this is technically where we should have been at the end of February. And I think this is where we would have been if we didn't have so much get caught up with judgments, liens, some probate issues. So we've got a little bit of ground to make up for, but not too much. So I'm happy with where we are. Super thankful for this opportunity in general. I think it's pretty surreal that we're able to do this because, hey, just in 2017 is when we purchased our first property, and let me see, right now with all the properties that we've closed on, yeah, so this hasn't, we're at a little over 230 properties at the moment. So I'm very excited. Very excited. We've come a long way since that first duplex in August of 17. And just reflecting on it, I'm extraordinarily thankful for all of the people that pointed me in the right direction, gave me a ton of their time to answer questions that I had about investing in real estate, and really just being open to allowing me to ask them questions whenever I was getting started. And still today, I still come up with a lot of questions to ask. Oh, wow. Eric, good morning. Happy to see you back on here. Good morning, Ryan, and congratulations. Thanks, Brian Reed. I really appreciate it. Declined to put in an offer on a house. The neighbor's house was just a total deal breaker. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. We have recently purchased a couple of properties where right next door on either side, they were vacant properties. And it took us a little bit longer to get them rented out. Now, obviously, we're going to attempt to be proactive in getting the city on board, either knock those down, find the owners of them, and buy them, or otherwise deal with them, maybe tax foreclosures or whatnot. But we're definitely very interested in buying these vacant houses, and we were initially apprehensive about buying it because of its proximity to vacant homes. Um, However, we got both of them rented out this week, and that was a big win. So while it's not an ideal situation, um, it didn't necessarily make it a bad purchase. However, if you're talking about an occupied property, since you're saying the neighbor's house, if it's occupied and the person's a train wreck, then that might be an insurmountable thing. How can you tell when something is a deal, like location, price, liens, and even an inspection? How do you do inspection? How do you factor all of those? That's a really good question, Brian Reed. So, really, I can tell if a property is a deal. So, the only real formula that I use is purchase price plus rehab costs is equal to or less than 75% of the after repair value. So if there's a property that is worth $100,000, if it is in tip-top shape, everything is perfect on it, then right from the beginning, I wouldn't pay more than $75,000 for that house. So a pristine house that's worth 100,000, immediately I would only pay $75,000 for that property. Now, to take that a step further, if that property needs a new roof, then however much that roof would cost, we would need to subtract that from that $75,000. So if that new roof is going to cost 10,000, then now the most I could pay for that property is 65,000. And then if it needs a new water heater, a new HVAC unit, whatever that property needs, just continue subtracting from that 65,000. And if you can get the property for less than 75% of the after repair value, which includes the purchase price and the rehab costs, then you likely have a deal on your hands. Now, obviously, the lower under 75% that you can get a property for. So let's say, purchase price plus rehab cost is 50% of the after repair value. Then that's like a home run of a deal. You have doubled your money. Well, probably more so than that, depending on how much money you have in the deal and how you structure that financing in a very short amount of time, just with one deal. That's great. I would consider just a base hit to be purchase price plus rehab equals less than 75% of the ARV. So that is how I would kind of qualify a deal, and that is the formula that we stick to pretty solidly. And the reason that we stick to that is because we don't want to leave any of our own money into the deal. So at this point, we have 200 over 230 homes, and we don't have any of our own money in a deal. We started buying properties in 2017. We did not come from a lot of wealth. We did not come from, whatever else that might make us able to scale so quickly. We don't have really high paying W-2 jobs. The only way that we were able to scale so quickly is because we have not left any of our own money in the deals that we've done. So because we're not constrained to the amount of money that we have to work with, then we're able to grow as quick as we can acquire other people's money to utilize. So when we stay at 75% or below that after repair value, then whenever we get that property move in ready, rent it out, we have that property rented out for a couple of months, then we approach a more traditional lender, like a bank or one of these institutional places that like to lend money on real estate portfolio, like Corvest. And then we approach them and we do a refinance, and we pay back our initial investors. So the people that helped us get that purchase price and rehab costs up front, we finance 100% of those with private lenders. And that is generally like a 10-12% interest only payment. So once we refinance, we take the bank's money, which is now at 20, 30 years, maybe 4 to 6% interest, and we will pay back those initial private lenders. Now, once we do that, they've been getting 10 and 12% interest only payments for however long, and they don't want that to stop. So then we will cycle that through, and we will take their money or allocate their money towards additional properties to purchase using that same formula. So that's everything about that. Location, that is completely up to you. So as far as location goes, I would say whatever area that you are comfortable investing in. I am a huge advocate of investing in single family homes with the intention of improving a community, right? So if there is a street that has 6 vacant homes, then I would really encourage someone to try to buy all 6 of those homes so you can get families back in there and it'll bring up the value of that neighborhood, of that community. It won't be an eyesore. People won't be nervous walking around it, right? So it's kind of like fixing the kind of like the broken window theory, if you're familiar with that. And overall, I think it's just good. It does the soul good. It does. It only has benefits to take something that is not producing or not performing and taking it and making it like a functional unit of society again. I'm a huge fan of that. It does my soul a lot of good. But other than that, location is really subject to whatever your long-term goals are. I've got one investor, he called me yesterday and he did a massive analysis about just cities nationwide and which one had all this demographic stuff. I'm not into that. I don't really care to look at any of that stuff. If you know an area, if you know that people want to live in that area, then it doesn't really matter. I'm not really a fan of making this unnecessarily complicated, right? People like living places, whether it's a town of 40,000, you've got a type of person that likes living in that town. If it is San Francisco or a place that is growing tremendously and is extraordinarily overpriced, then you've got people that like to live there. So if there are people that appreciate living in the area that you want to invest in, I think that is fine to invest there. I would just say err on the side of how can I make this location better by investing in single family homes there. Now, liens, I would not worry about liens whatsoever. So the title company that you use is really important. I think if you want to be a real estate investor long term, I think it would be great to identify and find a title company that you love working with, that you trust. Get title insurance on all of the properties that you purchase. And with that, all of the liens really are not your issue. So you're not going to be able to close. The title company is going to prevent you from closing if there are liens on the property. And if there are liens on the property that the title company missed, then that title insurance that you purchase will cover any of the liens that come up later on down the road. So I would never recommend that someone do like a quit claim deed or um, just have someone sign a property over to you. I think that's probably a pretty bad idea. And as far as inspections go, I would say that if this is the first property or two that you are purchasing, then I would definitely say that you should do an inspection. Some home inspectors for investors, they offer like a discount price. And the reason they may discount their price is because on the home inspection for an owner occupant, you're going to get a massive report that the bank is going to look at. Because it has to fit into whatever loan program that they're doing, and you're going to want to be really thorough so that you can negotiate because you're paying very close to retail price. If you're an investor, some inspectors have discount pricing because they will still give you a report, but it won't be as long as that full home owner inspection that is typical. So if you find an inspector that likes working with investors, if you show up when that inspector is looking at the property, then he will likely love to tell you and talk to you about all of the things he's looking for. I've never met an inspector that doesn't like sharing the knowledge that they have. So for the first 4 or 5 properties that I purchased, I did use an inspector. I shadowed him the entire time. And to the best of my ability at this point, I attempt to duplicate what I saw the inspector do. So I've got a list of things that just in broad strokes I look for as I'm walking through a property. But by and large, I would say that I miss things regularly, and it may be cost effective to get an inspection done on every property. But at this point, if we get an appropriate price and if I don't miss anything like foundation issues or a roof that has 4 layers and cedar shake under it, then for the most part, I'm okay. I don't mind doing a lot of these capital expenditures on a property as we plan on having this portfolio for 50, 60 years, maybe even longer. Who knows? So that's everything that I have to say about that. I hope that's helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, please um, don't hesitate to reach out. And also, I'd like to point out that we've got 48 people on this live stream breaking the record. So thanks everyone for being here. If you have any questions about investing in real estate, by all means, let's talk about it. And again, you're at 186 properties last time you watched. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So that was like in October or November, because we closed a couple of things in December that pushed us all the way to 200. And we have set our sights after we were able to push to 200 at the end of last year. We have kind of repositioned ourselves, and we are trying really hard to buy 200 homes this year. So that means about 17 per month, which would come out to be right at about 204 properties for the year. So at this point, we're at 31 properties that we've purchased so far. After today, it'll be 34. We're closing on 3 at around 11:30, and then we should have been at 34 by the end of February. So we're running a little bit behind, but I'm positive that we're going to be able to pick up some steam, especially as we get a couple of these larger refinances done and have a lump sum of capital to go out and repurpose or recycle and purchase more properties. Good morning. Good morning. All right. If you pay to have a clouded title cleared, can you lose the money you paid to have this done if someone claims the rights to the property? Good morning, WB Blue. So, no, a title company is one of the most important relationships that you can have as a real estate investor. Now, if you're buying your first property, I would go to some local real estate investor meetups. I would figure out what title company in the area really enjoys working with some real estate investors, and I would run everything through them. So, paying to get a clouded title cleared is not necessarily a concept that I'm familiar with. So if you go to a title company and they do the title search and find issues with that title, then I would say it is going to be the seller that needs to clear those up by paying off whatever judgments or liens are on that property. Now, if you decide to help that seller and get a deal on the property by paying that judgment or lien, I would only recommend doing that through a title company. And I would also confirm with that title company that you have the ability to purchase title insurance on that property after it's closed. Now, that title insurance is going to be what protects you against future liens and future judgments that may have been missed on that property prior to you purchasing it. And then after you purchase that property, it's up to you to make sure that you treat contractors and all your other creditors fairly so that they don't place liens or judgments on your property. And you will continue to have a free and clear, a property with a clear title. So I think that's a great question, and I think that I think the title company is one that's often extraordinarily overlooked. So it might be worthwhile to bring on a title company or the people that we work with to answer some questions about title company or do some type of interview about how investors can the things that they should do on every transaction and definitely some things to avoid, because even if it were the greatest deal in the world, I would not close it outside of a title company. If a seller's only stipulation is that it has to be a quitclaim deed, then I would not purchase that property. That would be a big mistake. We want title insurance on every single transaction that we do. Good morning, Ryan. Happy Friday. Hey, Tolu. Happy here. You answered a lot, brother. Thanks for your help in the community. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. What's the process on a property where one of the owners is in a nursing home? It wouldn't be any different. So some title companies are down to travel and be kind of like a mobile notary and do a remote closing or a mobile closing. I don't really know what you want to call it. Maybe even a portable closing, where they will go to one of the sellers who has issues traveling or other circumstances. So that wouldn't be an issue at all if you work with the right title company. It might cost a little bit more depending on the title company. Who knows if they have kind of traveling fees, but I wouldn't worry about it. One of the things that we try and do with all of the sellers that we work with is make it like a really frictionless uh, experience. So if the seller is at a nursing home and if it's really important to them that they don't have to travel to the title company, then I would try to help that happen. I think that's probably the right thing to do. They still need to have, all their cognitive abilities. If they don't have the bandwidth to sign something, then you shouldn't push that, and you should follow whatever legal process that needs to be done in order for that to occur. And then all of the title search will still be done the same way, regardless of where the sellers are residing. And the title company will still have the same guarantees after closing with the title insurance that you definitely need to purchase. Have you ever done a 203K for a property? No, I have not. So one of the stipulations of a 203K loan is that you owner occupy that property after you rehab it. I think it is a fantastic way to get a property and to kind of buy a property with equity. So a 203K loan does 100% of the purchase price, I believe, and also 100% of the rehabs necessary. So a good friend of mine is actually selling a property right now to a person that's buying it with a 203K loan. So I've asked him just to update me on that process and what that looks like on his end, because there are some additional inspections that all the repairs and the rehab costs have to be approved by the lender that's providing that 203K loan, generally FHA. So that is a little bit of added bureaucracy, but hey, if at the end of the day it means that you get to live in a property with 20 to 30 grand of equity from the moment you move in, well, after the repairs are done, then I think it's probably worth doing some additional paperwork and jumping through some additional hoops. I think this is a great way to get started, but I personally have never done it. So the path that I've kind of taken is the first property that I purchased. I was 23. It was not an investment whatsoever. The only reason I bought that property was because I was living with a roommate at the time, and the apartment complex kept raising up our rent. So we lived there for like 2 or 3 years, and we started at 900, and then I think if we stayed that last or that third year, then it was going to be like 1300, and that was just too much. And I said, hey, if I just bought a house, would you pay half of the mortgage? He said, sure. So we ended up, I bought a house, and he paid half the mortgage for a couple of years until I got married. And then we bought um, 17 acres in the middle of nowhere, really, down in North Carolina, and built a house. And I lived in that house for maybe a week and then sold it. So we were able to profit a decent amount off those two kind of owner occupied purchases. And then when I moved up here to Ohio, we bought a very small home for like 70,000. We bought a 700 square foot house, and we lived in that for quite some time, saving a lot of money because our mortgage payment was like 400, 500 bucks per month, somewhere in there. And we haven't done the 203K because we've been able to kind of profit from real estate without it. And we've also, when we moved up here and got serious about getting involved in real estate, because the first home that I purchased and also the land that we purchased and built on, I did not know anything. I got very lucky that I was able to profit on that. But I think it was Dwight Eisenhower that said, one of the best things you could do is buy a property and leave it in better condition than you found it. And I think if you've got like a 20, 30-year lens on, if that's the horizon that you're looking at things, then you really can't go wrong. And it would be hard to lose money if you improve properties while you occupy them. So I think that's fantastic. We currently have 77 people on. This is kind of blowing my mind. I don't really know how to act. If you have any questions whatsoever, go ahead and post them in the chat. The title and kind of the headline for today was how to buy rental properties without any of your own money. How do you turn business credit to cash? So I'm not really a fan of business credit. I don't really like, I feel like all of the things, all of the videos that I've ever watched about building business credit has been very scammy. I don't think that it would be a good idea. And also all of the, like the end goal of all these business credit videos and webinars that people do, it's pretty much leveraging your personal credit to apply for credit cards under the name of businesses that have like 0% introductory APRs or whatever, and then using those to do business things for like the 18 months that you have them. And I think that is largely unnecessary, if especially for real estate investing. So I would say that I'm more of a fan of doing things the old-fashioned way when it comes to business credit, and I think that your business should build credit by providing goods or services to the community at a fair rate for a decent amount of time. So most lenders want to see your business ran profitably for 2 years before they start lending you money. And I think that all of this, like Duns and Bradstreet or whatever it is, filing an LLC and registering it there, I think it's all a waste of time if you're not actually a business that's profitable, that banks would want to lend to, right? So it's not like there's a secret recipe that somebody can sell you to get business credit and have banks immediately just give that business some money based on their name and their Duns and Bradstreet number. That is probably going to be very high interest, and it's probably going to come with some significant consequences if you're not careful on that. And especially if you are so new to a specific business or industry that that is what you're interested in doing, in order to get a start, then it is, while it could work, it's, in my opinion, adding undue risk. So of all of the options available to someone that is just starting, I would say trying to do some of this business credit stuff is one of the last things that I would possibly recommend. I finally got an accepted offer on a crazy market. I can use a 203K loan and save 30K on repairs. That's awesome. Great work. Good morning. Happy Friday. You as well. Have you ever used a HELOC? Yes. Hey, Antoine. Happy to see you here. Yeah, I think HELOCs are really useful. So we have used them on investment properties. So it's not necessarily like a home equity. It's just an investment property line of credit, or it's a line of credit secured by an investment property. However, I would say that we prefer long-term debt rather than lines of credit. So from a business perspective, lines of credit are generally short term, maybe like a year, renewable every year, whereas you have to use that line of credit and then take it back to zero multiple times throughout that year. That's how the banks want you to interact with that kind of debt instrument. And if you just do like a refinance on the underlying property and pull some cash out, then that cash that you pull out doesn't really need to be answered for, and it's not renewable on a annual basis. So even though I haven't been an investor through one of these market cycles, when I talk to a lot of investors that either went bankrupt or lost a significant amount of their net worth in the past, like housing correction, I would say that one of the things that they had in common were the usages of lines of credit and being overextended on properties. So I would say, especially if it's a short-term annual renewable line of credit, and if the market shifts, then line of credits can be non-renewed at the end of those 12 months. And the last thing you want to do is have a fully extended line of credit and that thing be non-renewed, because then you have to come up with that cash immediately in order to pay that off. Do liens survive the sheriff sale? So here locally, the foreclosure auction, I would say that here locally, I think you are in Montgomery County, Ohio, as well, based on some of your other questions. I could be wrong though, but here in Montgomery County, I know that as soon as you win a property, you've got to put that down payment on it. They'll give you a little receipt. You take that receipt to your title company, and I think you've got like 2 or 3 weeks from the county to find any sort of title issues. And title issues are one of the only reasons, if not the only reason, that you would be able to back out of that deal, because at the sheriff's sale they have to give you a free and clear title from that. So any of the liens should not survive in theory. However, I would definitely, even if you get it at a sheriff's sale, I would still close it through the title company. And I say that meaning you should still go and do a title search on it and not give the the county the remaining balance until the title comes back clear. Good morning. I'm looking to buy a fourplex as a commercial property to use as a business storefront for myself and also live in a unit and rent the unit. Any suggestions on doing that? No, that's extraordinarily specific. I think it's a fantastic idea. Um, if you can find that type of kind of mixed use building, it's so specific, in fact, that I would not be surprised if you had to go a few municipalities, a few cities over to find that exact building to meet that need. So the cautions that I would have is because it is so specific. I would want to make sure that it is a good place for your business to be. So if you are wanting to do like a barbershop, or I don't know what your store is going to be, a computer repair, whatever the industry is, if it's not a decent location for that, I wouldn't do it. I think it might it would probably be wise to do the 4 unit, because I think the 4 unit's a great idea. Doing the house hack of a 4 unit, I think I would keep those separate. So I would pick one, either the storefront or the 4 unit, and I would tackle those separately, because I just don't think you want to necessarily be subject to running your business out of a location that might not be ideal for your business. Because depending on what your business is, location is really important. Awesome. And I am a huge fan of the idea of buying a 4 unit, living in one of the units, and renting out the other three. I think, especially when you are trying to plan on how to kind of excel from nothing, or from a very small amount of capital, I think that this strategy is probably the best way to kind of jumpstart your success. It's going to immediately, allow you to live so close to free, especially if you had more rooms in the unit that you're living in, and you could rent out the room or one of the rooms in your unit. Then you would definitely be living for free. You would be making money on the spread between your income and expenses. You would be building equity in the appreciation and the principal pay down. And you'd also be establishing yourself as a real estate investor. So 2 years from now, after you have that property, you can count your rental income from properties as income to kind of offset any of the debt that you have. So it balances out that debt to income, making you more bankable in the future. And it's going to be one of those things that, given the way real estate has acted historically, 5, 10 years, you're going to be in a really good position, cash flow positive, with a massive amount of equity, with a lower than purchase price loan balance on the property. So you'd have equity to pull from, cash flow to pull from, and a positive history of being an investor that banks would love to see. So even extracting your idea of having a storefront in there, it's a fantastic, fantastic idea. So good work. All right. Well, if you have any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. Let me get that banner back up. So there you go. And in the meantime, again, I just wanted to highlight At this point, our portfolio, I believe, is right around the 16 to 17 million dollar mark. So we've got about 230 properties in total, um, with about $17 million worth of real estate in that portfolio. And when my brother and I started, we started with about $100,000 in 2017. And sometime in 2019, uh, maybe 2020, we did a refinance of some of the properties. We went from the private lender money to long term money, and we were able to pull out that initial $100,000 that we put in. So at this point, we have no money into a portfolio of about $17 million. So I just wanted to take a moment and discuss how that's possible, why that's possible, and how you can easily achieve the same thing to whatever scale you desire, just because of the way real estate has operated since real estate's been around, right? So there are four main ways to make money in real estate investing. The first way, you've got cash flow. The second, you've got the appreciation. The third, you've got the tax benefits. And then the fourth is the principal pay down. Now, in order to take advantage of that principal pay down, obviously it has to be a leveraged asset. But the cash flow and the appreciation are probably going to immediately be the two that allow you to scale a portfolio without any of your own money into the property. So obviously the cash flow is income minus your expenses. And whenever you are analyzing these properties, you want to make sure that you are cash flow positive despite whatever type of financing that you're putting on the property. Now, I shared earlier that our ideal formula that we do not break is purchase price plus rehab cost is equal to or less than 75% of the after repair value. So you've got a significant amount of equity there. And if you can purchase a property using that formula, then you're well on your way to being able to build a portfolio without any of your own money into the deal. And the way that this works is if the purchase price plus any of the outstanding rehab costs are equal to or less than 75% of the after repair value, then as soon as you get that property rented out, the banks like to call that seasoning. So after it's a stable asset, it doesn't have any deferred maintenance on it. It is occupied by someone that is paying on a monthly basis. They consider that to be stable. They consider that to be seasoned. Most banks want to see uh, it occupied and rented out for about 6 months before they lend on it. That way they can see the solid payment history. And whenever it's seasoned, most banks will give you a 75% loan to value uh, on that property, meaning they're going to give you 75% of that after repair value. So once you find a property that fits that formula, once you make all the necessary repairs and rent it out, you have it seasoned for however long. I wouldn't rush that process because each bank is different and you want to have great relationships with all of the lenders that you work with. You're going to be able to refinance that property and pull out all the initial capital that you put in, assuming you stayed under that 75% that we initially discussed. So as you find real estate that fits that formula, you're also going to want to make sure that the cash flow is positive. So if you taking on that deal means that you're going to lose $50 to $100 per month because the income isn't like what that property is going to rent out for isn't sufficient to take care of all those expenses, then you're likely not going to want to do that deal because in speaking with investors that lost a great deal of real estate in the last housing crisis or housing crash, if the property is analyzed for cash flow based on rent, while the housing values went down tremendously, rent did not. So if it is a cash flow positive property, when you purchased it, there's not much that can happen, especially if you are already on long-term debt that's going to make that property go from cash flow positive to negative. The only risk that you have, I think, that I can think of, like a mass rental, like a lowering in rental rates, would be government interdiction, like the uh, I can't remember what it's called, but where rent is steady all the time. I think they have it in New York. I'm not sure. Anyway, government intervention, or if a larger employer of that area kind of pulls out, and then you have a lot of housing and not that many people that need to live in that area. So, as far as thinking about rents decreasing, those are the two biggest risks. Otherwise, if it's cash flow positive from the time you purchase it, it's going to be cash flow positive the entire time when it's rented out that you own it. So if you already are in the property for less than 75%, then the second way to make money in real estate investing of the appreciation, that's kind of what kind of icing on the cake, because you're already cash flow positive. You've already entered the deal at 75% of the after repair value or less. So you're going to be able to get all your money back when you transition to long-term financing or just when you purchase that property. Um, so any appreciation that you experience immediately goes onto the equity side of your balance sheet. So it's immediately going to increase your net worth. It's is immediately going to be accessible to you from either a line of credit or doing a cash out refinance. And then the tax benefits and the principal pay down are are next. So the principal pay down every month that resident, that occupant pays their rent and you pay your mortgage, which is part of your expenses, then this is not money that you are having to pay. This is money that that resident is paying on your behalf that is also going into uh, kind of the equity side of your of that property. So they're paying down the balance of the mortgage. The property is appreciating. The properties because they exist outside of the financial system, like since they're not tied directly to the fiat dollars of the financial system, appreciation generally is the same, if not more, than inflation. So this year, I think people are saying that inflation is about 7%, and I wouldn't expect real estate to do anything short of 7% growth in overall value. I know Zillow is off on a lot of things very often, but a lot of the kind of market analysis updates that they've been sending to us lately have shown forecasted increases of 16 to 25%, depending on the zip code. So that is the benefit of appreciation on a mass scale. I'm gonna check to see if we have any questions coming in. Got 7. All right. Appreciate you. 73 watching and 10 likes. Slap that like button. This is excellent information. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I can't believe 81 people are on it. Congrats on the more viewers. You deserve it. You give a lot of value here. Smash that like button. Thanks, guys. How long does it take for your equity to make a purchase on another property? Um, so I think you said you're using a 203K loan. So if you're using a 203K loan, uh, then you're going to be living in that property. If you're living in that property, I would check around with some local credit unions. There's a couple different things that you could do. You could refinance your property based on the equity, the new equity that you have, and pull a little bit of cash out, because most owner occupied programs allow you to do like a 95% loan to value loan. 95% allows you to unlock a lot of equity. But refinancing is also a big thing to do that's going to cost a couple grand. However, any money that you put into your bank account doesn't necessarily need to be paid back. The other thing that you could do, I know a couple of local credit unions here in Ohio offer this. They will do home equity lines of credits for the properties that you occupy up to 100%. So the line of credit on a homeowner or owner occupied property is kind of like a fancy and also very cheap credit card. So you only pay interest on the money that you use. So if you get a line of credit for $30,000 and you haven't used any of it, then you are not paying any interest on a monthly basis. If you need to replace your roof and it costs about 5 grand, then you would only be making interest payments on that line of credit for 5 grand worth of that interest. So if you're at a 5% annual rate, then you're going to be paying 5% on that $5,000 that you have extended to pay for that roof. Now, your payment is going to be interest only. So it's going to be extraordinarily small compared to a credit card, which means it's going to be really easy for you to pay down that principal because the interest only payment is so small. So I would highly recommend that you use your equity in your home on a HELOC in some capacity. As I've mentioned several times on this channel, we have a lot of private lenders that we work with, and one of the things that some of our private lenders do is this thing called, arbitrage, right? So if you get a $30,000 line of credit at, let's say, 5%, then you can make some money on the spread or arbitrage of that. So our private lenders, if they lend us 30 grand at 10 or 12%, then they're making the difference on that spread. So they're making 5 to 7% because that's the difference between the loan that they have given us and then also what they owe to the bank for their line of credit. Now, I would only do this with things that are secured, because in the event that investment defaults, you need a way to recover that full $30,000 to pay off that home equity line of credit. So if it's secured, I wouldn't necessarily view it as a risky thing. If you use that line of credit to buy additional rental properties, I wouldn't view that as a risky thing. A home equity line of credit, I'm significantly more open to you doing that. Ooh. I'm more open to you doing that, like home equity line of credit, because a home equity line of credit is not going to be renewable on an annual basis. It's going to have like a 5-year draw period and then like a 10-year payback. So you're able to use that money at your discretion for 5 years, and then you start paying it back years, 6 through 16 or something like that. I know every bank is different on the way that they draft up their HELOCs. So I would definitely check with the lender that you are most comfortable working with to do your HELOC. And I think that's definitely a great way to use your existing equity to kind of launch your future investments. I want to use my 401k for private lending, but can't roll over to a self-directed IRA because I still work at the job. Any cons to drawing a loan against the 401k and using the cash flow to pay off the loan? I don't think so. I am super fuzzy on 401k loans because it's been 6 or 7 years since I've had a 401k. I know that the 401k loan is what I used to buy my first house when I was 23. And I was able to pay that back pretty quickly. And I remember thinking that it was a fantastic thing to do. I know that one of the investors that I talk to a lot that buys properties here, he constantly borrows from his 401k to buy rental properties and pay it back. And if it's a 401k loan, it's a loan to you, and you don't have to specify what you're using those proceeds for. So there's like no red tape on you lending that money, investing in properties with it, um, or making any other investments with it. So I think that's a really good strategy to do if you aren't yet able to roll it over. I would just make sure of anything that is remotely related to Wall Street that you read all of the fine print that comes along with those. So I know some 401k loans like have it in the fine print that if you leave that job, then that loan on the 401k is like immediately due in full. I would make sure that that clause isn't there. And if that clause is there, I would make sure that whatever you use that money to invest in, you've got the ability to be pretty liquid. So for our private lenders, we have a little clause in there that says, hey, if you can call this note at any time, giving us a 90-day written notice. So I would just be upfront with whoever you're lending that money to and say, hey, I don't have any intentions on leaving this job, but if I get fired or have some major life event, I may need to call this note and have it paid off pretty quickly. And whoever you're working with should be pretty understanding of that and be prepared to help you accomplish that given that scenario. But if they don't have that fine print, then it's not an issue. And I think it's just an overall good idea. Anything that you can do to get your money out of the stock market and out of Wall Street, I think is going to benefit you greatly, so long as you make it into investments that you have positive control over and that you are able to estimate some sort of return comparable to the stock market, which, I think any private loan that you could possibly do is better than anything that you could do in the stock market because it actually has a significant amount of accountability behind it. It's secured. So in the event that it's defaults, it's not like your account goes to zero. You just now have a property instead of a loan. So that's a benefit. And you're also able to have a lot more control about who your money benefits rather than whoever Wall Street chooses to endorse. But I won't go too heavy on that side. Thanks for the channel. Your info is always right on point. No frills, just the truth. I like that, Terry. Thank you. Rent control. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. How did you meet your private lender, and what are some things you can say or ask to get him to invest in you? So that's a really good question, and it's a pretty bizarre answer. So I'm going to start off by pointing you in the right direction that I think will give you a lot more clarity, not based on my personal experience, because even though we have had a massive amount of success in finding private lenders, I don't think it's a very replicable thing to do. And I could be wrong. I just don't know. But the book is called Raising Private Capital by Matt Faircloth. I've got it somewhere on my bookshelf. So I would definitely recommend giving that a read. And I would say that if you do nothing else, if you just familiarize yourself with the different investment related vehicles and the actual process of taking a 401k, rolling it over into a self-directed, teaching some other people how to do that. Because a lot of people just have these 401ks sitting with previous employers and they don't really know what to do with them. And they don't really have a place to transfer it. They just know it's there and keep an eye on it, but are probably slightly leery of it because they don't work there and they're not part of that, ecosystem anymore. So I think being able to have a really solid understanding of those of the options available to those type of people, and then educating people on how they can contact different custodian companies to roll those over successfully and kind of take positive control over the money that they have in those investment vehicles. I think that is going to bring a lot of private lenders your way because you're already kind of teaching them things that they didn't know, and hopefully you've got some sort of track record or provable interest in real estate, that they wouldn't mind taking those funds and giving to you for likely a better return than they were getting wherever that money was sitting at their previous employer. So I think that is just paramount in getting started in this, is learning the nuances of that. Because while, especially again, I was in law enforcement in 2017. That's when I left. My network was other cops. That's all. Like, nobody was sitting around with 6, 7 figures in their bank account just waiting for a good investment opportunity, right? So a lot of our private lenders are, at first, my first private lender was a guy that I went through the police academy with, who left the department at about the same time that I did. So I helped him and roll his 401k over into a custodian account, and then we structured a loan, and I borrowed that money from him. And the trust was already there because we went through the academy together. We worked really closely, and we were, really good friends. So that is how I got the first private lender. And there are likely a lot of people already in your network that have sizable, I say sizable as in $20,000 to $50,000 in a 401k from a previous employer that's just sitting there. You likely don't know it because they don't really go around talking about it, but there are likely a couple of people in your network that already have that. So I think it's a really good place to start. And then I think as you start proving out your concept, as you start kind of working with the resources and the relationships that you already have, via word of mouth, via your growing track record, you're going to start getting the attention of other people. One of the things that I have done to surround myself with people that would probably like to be private lenders is I really pay attention to kind of my immediate network. I really pay attention to who I spend a lot of time talking to. Um, I've gone kind of above and beyond to be in rooms with like-minded people that are trying to grow businesses, trying to improve their financial situation. Some of them are way ahead of the rest of the crowd. They've sold their businesses for a couple $1,000,000 or tens of millions of dollars. Other people are just getting started or trying to figure out what to do. But there are a lot of different avenues and networks of people that you can get involved with. And as soon as you start probably paying attention to the type of people that you are hanging around, and the people that are just doing the same thing day in, day out, I mean, it's fine to be friends with them, but that's likely not who you're going to want to spend the majority of your time with if you are interested in kind of leveling up your financial situation. So I would recommend just building a private lender database from kind of your friends and family network, while also being really intentional about what kind of new friends you're bringing into your network. So being in the right rooms with the right people is a big deal. And then I would say that the last thing that I could say about this, so just to recap clearly, the first thing is to educate yourself on the retirement avenues available to people that want to be private lenders. So the self-directed IRAs and 401ks, educate yourself on that and get comfortable on walking someone through the process. If you want to reach out to some of these custodians, off the top of my head, I know of Equity Trust Custodian and Directed IRA Custodian. Those are two of the custodian companies that offer this, and I'm sure they would love to talk to you. And I know that both of them have like webinars and online content that you can look to learn more about this, in addition to that Raising Private Capital book by Matt Faircloth. So the first is educate yourself on the tools available to you. The second is surrounding yourself with the right people, because you're not looking for one private lender, right? You're looking for a network of people that have money that they're interested in lending you. So I would much rather have 50 people with $50,000 than one person with 2 million, right? So that's my personal preference. And I think there's a lot more stability in that, because if one thing goes wrong with that investor relationship with 2 million, then, in their personal life, if they need that 2 million back, whatever the situation be, you're going to be significantly more stable if you've got a lot of people with a smaller amount of money. So surrounding yourself with the right people. And then the third thing would just be constantly be running your mouth about real estate investing and the fact that you are, so whatever your market is, whatever type of investments you want to do, if that's single family homes, if that's multifamily homes, figure out what your numbers are, become intimately familiar with those. Find an interest rate that you are comfortable giving to private lenders. And if that number for you is 8%, then as you're rambling about real estate investing, as you're out there talking about real estate investing to everybody say, this was my line that I always said as I was going around talking about real estate investing, and that was, we regularly borrow money from private lenders at 10 and 12%, backed by first position mortgages on properties. That's kind of all I said. And sometimes people would ask additional questions about that. Sometimes people never hear it, but it doesn't take long to say that one sentence, and it's going to catch the ears of whoever is actually interested in being one of your private lenders. So if you know that your business model is buying rental properties in Kansas City, and that you are specifically looking for single family homes in, this one area, then I would say, hey, my name is Ryan. I buy single family homes in this part of Kansas City. And in order to help me grow, I regularly borrow money from friends and family at 10 and 12% that's backed by first position mortgages on these properties. And then, have a couple other lines ready. Like, so worst case scenario, if I default, then the lender doesn't lose their money. They just gain a property instead. And there's a lot of conversations that can stem off of you saying that. But nonetheless, I wouldn't look for a place to kind of put all your eggs in one basket, like that one lender example. I would just constantly be learning, constantly increasing your network with like-minded people, and then just always put out into conversation exactly what you intend on doing. I recently borrowed 15K from my 401k to buy a car for a rental, and I pay it back monthly from the cash flow and the interest you pay on that goes back to you. It's a win-win. It is. It really is. Great job, Tolu. I think that's awesome. I have bad credit, but a lump sum in the bank. Where should I start, or should I invest in someone like you? So, life happens. There is no judgment here. Bad credit is a thing. I am not a fan of the credit system. I am not a fan of our entire school system, to be honest. I was not a good student whatsoever, and I had to work through this weird thing where I realized that I didn't fit into the system, that I wasn't, in fact, stupid. I just didn't learn the way that most public school systems work, right? So similarly, I feel that same way about credit scores, right? Like, they are completely based on just a bunch of arbitrary information that says nothing about me as a person. So I want to get that out there first. The second thing I'll say on that is, unfortunately, being a real estate investor relies pretty heavily on your credit score. Now, I've made a video on this channel where I shared one of the times that I really jacked up my credit. And fortunately, I was able to fix it, but it was really scary because since I am a real estate investor, I could have potentially hurt my ability to get any future loans. So when that happened, that's when I realized, hey, I should probably educate myself on what goes into a credit score. And then I should probably play by those rules, even though I don't agree with them or care about them in any way, because they do, unfortunately, impact my ability to be a decent real estate investor. Now, if you're a real estate investor, you do not need to worry about having like an 800 plus credit score. In fact, the more you get into real estate investing, the lower your credit score is going to be, because you're going to have a massive amount of inquiries all of the time. At every refinance, at every time you search for additional debt, they're going to want a copy of your credit report. Um, and the frequency at which you have your credit checked are going to far exceed the amount that makes this credit score acceptable. So one lender told me that while 800 is a fantastic score for your normal person, if you are above a 700 as a real estate investor, then that's the benchmark, being 700 or more. Nobody expects a real estate investor to be above an 800 because of the way that those inquiries are made. Now, I imagine that if you're a highfalutin multifamily syndication person, that you're not doing any personal guarantees or something like that, sure, you could have an 800 credit score because you're not having nearly the amount of inquiries. But in the single family home investing space, you're always going to have inquiries because you're always going to personally guarantee the loans that you take. I'm sure this video is going to hit the ears of someone that knows how to finance single family homes without a personal guarantee. And I'm not interested in having a conversation about it. None of the lenders that I work, that's really an option. So those are the things that I would say. So fix your credit score, because you're going to need it. And if you've got a lump sum in the bank, that means that you have some sort of financial wherewithal. So you just need to be a little bit more well-rounded and pay attention to those things. But I get life happens, that there's a lot of things that can negatively impact your credit that kind of had to be done. So if you are in a position where you're going to have to just wait out this 7-year period where you have bad credit and you're probably not going to be able to get a loan, then you're right. I think the best bet would be either lending the money to somebody that is investing in real estate and get monthly interest payments on that, or partner with somebody that has a really high credit score that is very bankable, uh, that just needs money, right? So if you're the one providing the money, the other person is doing all of the work. They have the credit score and hopefully like a high W-2 job so that they can qualify for any of the loans that you two want to take on together. I would make an exception to my general uh, dislike of partnerships if I'm working through something like that. Because the last thing you want to do is just sit around waiting for your credit score to get better. So I would definitely say lending the money out or partnering with someone temporarily for a season so that you can get involved in real estate, uh, build back up your credit, and put your money to work still. Now, I also know some people that have had really bad credit scores, but there's, nothing wrong with them as a person. They're still very personable. They still have means, resources, and a really solid work ethic. Because again, your credit score doesn't define who you are as a person. And some people with low credit scores have been very successful in negotiating a bunch of subject to purchases or seller financing purchases to getting started in real estate investing. And I think that's also a really fantastic approach. So if you know that you made a mistake and it's going to take 7 years to wash off your credit report, if you can show people that are looking to sell the properties, like, hey, you were going to have to kind of put together a little resume for yourself and figure out a way to package yourself in a manner that's appealing to these people that have properties they want to sell. A lot of real estate investors that are kind of ready to retire, they still love the monthly income because they've gotten accustomed to it, but they just don't want to deal with those day-to-day the issues of running a real estate investing business. So they're likely inclined to at least consider an option where they seller finance, you manage the property, you make monthly payments to them, and you get to keep the spread between what the rental income is, all the other expenses, and the mortgage payment. So there are some ways to get really creative and work around your credit score, in addition to just partnering with someone else or lending your money out. One of my two favorite real estate investors on the planet. Great info this morning, sir. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Great info, man. You guys are making me pumped up. 2 six-figure jobs to unemployment and now relocating. Have savings, but unsure if we should buy, build, or invest in income-producing property. Our next move needs to make sense. Any opinion? Well, I always have opinions. Let me think about this question a little bit. So, I would not build income-producing property. Being bankable is a really important thing. And unfortunately, if you are currently unemployed and you're also relocating, uh, I would say that unless you're able to get another job in a similar industry pretty immediately after you relocate, then you're likely not going to be bankable for quite some time. So you're going to want to be creative, similar to the kind of low credit score answer, and that you're going to need to either partner with somebody that has good W 2 income that is bankable until you are bankable again. If, since you said you had two, six-figure jobs, as soon as you get hired in a similar industry, banks like looking at pay stubs. So it's not like you have that self-employment 2-year gap to close up. You just have to close up that gap between now and whenever you start getting paychecks again, assuming you don't switch industries. So, um, yep, yep, I'll do that. I can answer it like that as well. So, when I first started, so I left law enforcement and I moved up here to Ohio and I got into insurance. I was not a bankable individual. And when I first rolled over my 401k from my previous employer, I lent money to other people like what I'm borrowing from people now. So I lent out, I think, like a total of about 50 grand to other people when I was first getting started. In addition, we purchased our first rental property in cash. So I bought it in cash and I lent out my retirement because I was not able to go in and get a loan for myself. Now, at one point, I had a kind of a pseudo partnership position where I was getting a W 2 paycheck. So the second property that I purchased, I actually was able to get a loan. That was only a $21,000 loan because the property that I bought was 28,000 and I needed to put $7,000 down. So that's how I got the second property. However, the third and fourth property were negotiated seller financing. So I did creative financing in order to get my foot in the door apart from banks. And after the fourth property, that's when my brother and I became partners. And my brother was bankable. He had a decent W 2 income. And that's when we started getting bank loans to take down properties. And then, during that time, we did some more seller financing stuff as well. And then, at a certain point, once you have that 2-year history in a new profession, and once you have that 2-year history as a real estate investor, then banks start counting all of the income that you're producing in those manners as well. So, truly, your situation is minus the sadness of unemployment. Mine was kind of voluntary, right? Yours might be too. I voluntarily became unemployed and voluntarily relocated. Um, So I kind of lived through that, and that's the steps that I did. And then I made the decision to surrender my 401k and that money that I rolled over and lent out to other people. And we started, I put that into our investing business. So I stopped lending to other people and started buying more of our own stuff. And I decided to surrender that retirement account. You deserve all the accolades. Thank you for all you do. I appreciate it. We've got 82 people on. This is really exciting. Any questions that you've got, more than happy to answer them. I hope this was a sufficient answer. So it really also comes down to, I would invest, definitely. I wouldn't obviously liquidate all of your savings, make sure that you're still comfortable personally, but I would definitely not want to wait around. And I would also strategically plan on building uh, a portfolio of income producing property and using kind of your W 2 as a tool to do that. So I would, especially as you're building, I would go ahead and try to, like, for path of least resistance, try to get another high income W 2 job. And that way you're bankable. And that way you can start building a portfolio of income producing properties so that in the event that you become unemployed again, you've got that income producing property to lean on. If you are not yet ready to own properties, then being a lender is most certainly available to you. There are a couple of private lenders that we work with that found themselves with a lump sum of money and decided to lend it to us so that they always had monthly income coming in. And some of them kind of subsidize, and they actually have lent us enough money to pay for all of their monthly personal expenses. So I think that's pretty cool because now they're free to do whatever it is that they want to, and all of their living expenses are already paid for. But in order to do something like that, you have to find yourself with a sum large enough to uh, generate all of your monthly expenses on an annual basis, assuming like 10%. Kimmy. Hey, Kimmy. I have around 40,000 cash and I'm interested in real estate business that can be bringing cash flow. How can I start? Well, um, if you've got $40,000, I would definitely suggest keeping 10,000 of it, and that might be a little low. I don't know what market you're in. I don't know the average home prices in your area. I would honestly look for areas where your money can go a lot further. And it really depends on what you want out of life, right? So it really depends on like what your long-term goals are and what you want to use these funds for, what you want to build it to. If you're looking to like drastically change your financial situation very quickly, then I would recommend moving and taking like drastic measures. Move somewhere where your dollar is going to go the furthest, right? So like $40,000 in California is like a drop in the bucket. Really won't get you much. $40,000 in the Midwest, you can do whatever you want to, right? So there are properties here in Ohio that, I mean, still, even in the market, it's gone up tremendously. You can still buy a property that is, rent ready, move-in ready for 55, 65,000. So if you're bankable, if you can get a loan on that, then the down payment on the $55,000 house or a $60,000 house is what, 20 grand? Let's do So 25% down on the $60,000 house is 15 grand. Throw in another 2 grand for closing costs, all in 17 grand. You now have um, 23 grand left over, a rental property that's going to be cash flowing. Um, you could do that again and dip below that $10,000 mark, just barely. And then you have two rental properties and $10,000. That's a really solid position to be in. So I mean, $40,000 is a lot of money. So congrats on having that much money. Congrats on having the discipline to keep that much money, right? So you're already set up for success. It's just a matter of what are you trying to do? How fast are you trying to do it? And where do you want to do it? Thank you. Yes, it is voluntary. Awesome. Super pumped for you then. Way to take that. Yeah, I think you're in a really strong spot. And I think I'm always slightly envious when I hear of people that have W-2 jobs of six figures or more. Because when I left law enforcement, I was making about $44,000 per year. So I have never been a high wage earning person. So there's a part of me that's still like, man, I wish I could get a job, a six figure job somewhere, you know. But at this point, I am very much so not a hireable individual. Thanks for your response, Ryan. Can you give me steps to activating this advice? Well, which advice? The moving one? I sought for your contact, but couldn't get your contact. This is great contact. You're in contact with me right now. I actually prefer over emails. I prefer people just to hop on the live stream and ask me questions because it's really hard to. I'm not good at communication, and this is Friday mornings on this live stream. While I know it's not like talking on the phone, this is definitely time that I set aside every week to answer all of the questions that come this way, and I'm more than happy to do so. So, and a lot of times the questions that you have are applicable to plenty of other people that just haven't tried to take the time to reach out. So, I'm a huge fan of doing this over responding to emails, but I'm also open to emails. I also put this email address up pretty regularly, so that's my email address if you want to email questions to it. But again, definitely prefer the live stream. So I would say just think about what you want out of life. Think long term. Push this out 40, 50 years. Figure out what type of lifestyle you want to live, how much that's going to cost. Think about where you want to live, what you want to do all day, uh, and then kind of reverse that and figure out how to build a business that kind of fits what you're wanting to do. So if you know that your lifestyle is going to take $6,000 per month, then you need to figure out how to use that $40,000 that you have now to build something that produces $6,000 per month. So if you start looking at a couple of properties that you could buy for 60,000, you do the analysis on it and you realize that you're going to be able to cash flow about $300 per month off that property. Well, now you know that you need 20 of those properties. So the numbers are going to change if you want to live in California. That's not a good example. If you want to live in like Arizona and these properties cost like $180,000 each and they make you $500 per month. Well, now you know that you need 10 to 12 of these properties in order to achieve that. So your $40,000 is going to stretch and go a lot further in a market where you can buy rental properties for 60,000 that cash flow 300 compared to 180,000 that cash flow 500. Good morning. Yeah, I'm happy to see you here. Welcome. And missed you this morning, man. We've got it's growing a little bit. So any Friday morning, come on by. I want to be independent from the system for myself and family, entrepreneurial route. Yes, the system. Just be mindful that not only does the system include the W-2 lifestyle, it also includes Wall Street, the stock market, and all of that. All of that's part of the system. So I'm completely with you. I am fundamentally against kind of being wrapped up in it. So I also think that once you stop contributing to a 401k, once you take positive control over your financial planning, once you take positive control over your financial position, especially in the sense of uh, putting together a plan that pays you $6,000 per month soon, rather than what the system would tell you to do, which is put together a plan that leaves you with a nest egg at the end of 30 years to live off of for the remainder of your life, right? If you stop contributing and trying to build this massive nest egg and you start putting your $40,000 to work on properties that produce money on a monthly basis, things change fast. I think it was one of those Dave Ramsey research or studies that he said on average it takes somebody that sets out to become a millionaire about 7 years to achieve that. How different is that from what we were kind of pushed towards of just building this massive $1 million nest egg inside of like a 401k? But it's also food for thought because the things that we're talking about now about investing in properties, the people that have those your retirement funds, that $1 million nest egg, they're doing the same exact thing on their end that we're talking about doing right now. Like, how do I take this $1 million and you know give them a 6% return, 8% return? Uh, so they're the ones that benefit. They're the ones that are experiencing this exponential growth and this early financial freedom. The businesses that are able to produce those returns, because if a business is giving out 6% to whatever shareholders or whatever else, then I mean you could only imagine how much they're actually making to pay for, all their C-suite people, all the board of directors, and all the bonuses, vacations, benefits, employees, and then down at the bottom after all those expenses are the shareholders. So when you put yourself at the top of that food chain, things can change very quickly. I'd love a duplex, but my family needs a 4-bedroom, hard to find in Dayton. We got some 4-bedroom duplexes. Let's see here. Your family needs a 4-bedroom. I don't know. I don't know, love. I think Dayton is still the better place. We're buying a 4-bedroom. We've got one under contract at the moment, 4-bed, 2-bath for 58,000. That would be life changing to buy a property, a home to live in for $58,000 and pay like a $350 mortgage payment, $400 mortgage payment per month, right? So when you're working with numbers like that, you don't necessarily need a duplex, right? Like a duplex would be awesome, but when I'm talking about house hacking and 4 units and all that, I'm talking to a single young professional, right? I'm talking to somebody that's like 20, 24, trying to get a massive jump start, maybe married, maybe one kid. But when you're talking about a family that needs 4 bedrooms, and I mean that's pretty much where my family is right now. We did not. We went with like a $70,000 home when we moved up here, rather than a 4 unit. We looked around at some. We looked around at some duplexes, and ultimately, we plan on having a lot of kids really quickly, so it wasn't a fit for us either. So we just went with the cheapest house that we were comfortable with so that we could save the most amount of our monthly income. So what we did was we bought that house for 70,000. It was a 2-bed, 1-bath. Um, our mortgage payment was 400 to 500 bucks per month. All of our living expenses, we got them down to less than $2,000 per month. And then all I did was spend every day trying to figure out how to increase my income. And we saved or invested all of the money in excess of $2,000 on a monthly basis. So we lived that way. We moved into that house when we had just one kid. We moved out of that house when we had 3 kids. So we lived there for, I think, 2.5 or 3 years. 3 kids in a 700 square foot house, 2-bedroom. So it was kind of bittersweet when we moved out. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, we had like a 1-person kitchen. It was a very small house, very uncomfortable. But because we made that sacrifice, because we had a plan, because we stuck to it for 2.5, 3 years, some of these months I was making $10,000, $20,000 and just investing the difference. So I would say that because we made those sacrifices, then the day that we moved out, hopefully we're not going to have to make those same sacrifices again, right? So I kind of miss those days just because they're behind us. But I don't think you need a duplex to accomplish what it is that you are looking to do. So more power to you. I think you've made the right decision. I think you're in the best of all possible markets to make a massive change or increase in your financial situation or position. So great work. Now you just got to stick to that plan, save a bunch of money, increase your income, and lower your expenses as much as you can. Do I need to live in the property before I can make some income? It depends on how you finance it. Some of the loans you can take, like one of the things that I think is pretty common for people to do that I think is a little unbecoming is you can get a loan because owner occupied loans, they'll finance up to 95% of it traditionally. And putting a 5% down payment is a lot better than putting down the 25%, which is generally standard for investment properties. So if you're buying a loan using an investment property loan and putting 25% down, then you don't have to live in that property before you rent it out. If you're telling the bank that you're going to live in it so that you can get that 95% loan and then you never move in and you rent it out, well, that's not good. I know one person who was extraordinarily upright up front with his lender, and he had every intention of living at a house for 6 or 7 months and then moving out and doing another loan and doing that for 6 or 7 months. And he's now got, I think, 11 properties. And I think 4 of them were acquired doing the every 6, 7 months he was moving method. So I think that's definitely an option that's available to you. If you're down to move a lot every 6 months, then I think that is maybe a decent strategy. But I wouldn't go around not being upfront with the banks about your plan. Make sure that's okay with the loans that they're giving you, and don't go around saying the wrong thing. So investment loans, straight to investment loans, no need to live there. 95% owner occupied loans, you definitely need to live there. Probably a balance between those two. Arrow Sponge Joe, how does your game plan differ before and after the real estate bubble pops? So I spent, when I first got into real estate investing, it was 2017. In 2016, that's when I started researching about real estate investing. And in 2016, everyone was swearing up and down that this bubble was about to pop and it was about to be '08 all over again. And a lot of the people on the internet, I mean, you can go back to like Bigger Pockets and listen to some of their stuff from 2016. You know, they're definitely talking about that, the next '08 crisis, right? So whenever I got my first couple of properties, I was really unsure. I really did not want to be hurt by this quote unquote housing bubble that's going to pop. It was, I started with like $100,000, but that was money that I was so frugal to save, right? Like I, in my head, sacrificed so much. I did not go out to eat with a bunch of friends. I lived in a really small apartment for a very long time. Didn't do anything fun. Watched every dollar. I had fun doing it because I knew what I was building, but that was money that took me a long time to accumulate that I do not want to lose. So I wasn't interested in going into something new just to lose it if the market corrected or the bubble popped. So what I did was, rather than listening to a bunch of people that had no real point, they were just speculating that given X, Y, Z statistic that they were looking at, this market is surely going to pop. I wanted to talk to people that had actually lost money during the housing crisis and what they were going to do differently to not lose money the next time. And what I found out is that most real estate investors that analyze their properties for cash flow, especially here in the Midwest, did not lose any money in 2008. While their housing values may have gone down, the rents did not go down. The rents may have not gone up, but they also did not go down. So the people that lost money, that really got put underwater, that are often televised complaining about it, are people that weren't necessarily real estate investors. They were people that were taking advantage of the like no income, no job type loans. So they were bad loans. They were using multiple of them to buy properties because they wanted those properties. They may have accidentally become a like an investor or a landlord or property owner, whatever you want to call them, and they may have started renting it out just because they weren't living there anymore. But there was not much like planning, intentionality, or investment strategy that went around with it. The people that were investing that got hurt in '08, like that were actually being strategic about acquiring properties and renting them out and analyzing them, were just simply over leveraged because they could get a loan for more than the property was worth, or because they could get a loan uh, that would allow them to free up some capital to buy additional stuff, but would leave their underlying asset negative in a negative cash flow position. Um, they lost money and went underwater a little bit. And one of my main mentors lost close to everything in that, but the situations that surrounded the reasons that he lost everything were ones that most people wouldn't be doing. He was trying to take a company public onto the stock market, and a bunch of bad things happened all at one time. So I think it would do everyone that is panicking about a real estate bubble a significant amount of it would do everyone a lot of good to really kind of put faces to names and not say something like the housing bubble pop, right? Because like right now, I mean, I really don't see it happening. I'm not in the business of speculating this, and I think it's one of those things where if a company is agile, if one is able to pivot, uh, if one has the appropriate financial position, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to uh, navigate through any of these things that may happen. So I would be really careful as to who you allow input into this, and the people that are voicing strong opinions figure out where they went wrong if they lost money, or if they're just saying something that they found out on the news or something. So I think one thing to keep in mind that came out of the last housing crisis, which we are starting to see a lot of now, is the fact that one of these hedge funds bought the largest portfolio of single family homes out of 2008. So while everybody else lost a lot, one of the hedge funds built the largest portfolio. And before they did this, it was kind of common knowledge that a single family home portfolio isn't possible to run logistically from like a hedge fund type basis. Well, this company proved that wrong, and now you've got a lot of companies that are getting into the single family rental space that are amassing portfolios of 14, 15, 16,000 homes, and they're doing so successfully. So with the inventory as low as it has been for so long, with material prices and supply chain shortages and all of that causing increases in the materials as well, I don't think that we're in a housing bubble. If anything, I think we're in a housing shortage, right? And even if there were a lot of foreclosures to hit the market, I think you've got enough cash trying to get into the real estate market at the moment that a lot of people, I think that would be eaten pretty quickly, so to speak. So, um, if you are analyzing properties for cash flow, if you are positioning yourself in a long-term debt as quickly as you can, then I think you're going to be fine. So if your strategy is have cash flowing properties on long-term debt, then the chances of a housing bubble eating your lunch is very slim. The areas where it's going to hurt if the market were to correct drastically and quickly are the people that are currently in the middle of flipping a house and the people that are currently on short-term loans. So if a housing crash happened today, all of the properties that we currently have that are on 20, 25, 30-year loans are fine because we're not selling those. We're not going to reposition those. They're cash flow positive right now. The banks aren't going to call those notes, and they're going to continue being cash flow positive so long as they're rented out. All of the short-term loans that we have, we would have to figure out how to renegotiate those. We would have to figure out how to, if the investors want to transition to long-term loans at maybe a lower percentage or the same percentage, just for a longer amount. And we would have to address that if people wanted their money back. We would have to try and sell those assets, come up with different investors that want to have additional 20, 25, 30-year notes. So we'd have to kind of move up a refinance. But more important than the real estate is the financial instruments behind the real estate, right? So, again, from 2008, you can look and see that a lot of that was caused by these bad mortgages. So since then, we have been in like one of the tightest, most strict lending periods. So all of the increase in the housing market that we've seen have now been on really sound loans that people can afford and do actually qualify for. So it's a completely different animal now than it was. And you can't possibly plan for something that has never happened before. So, because we don't know all the nuanced effects. So I think any more planning than all of the things that I just said is overkill and would likely leave you in kind of this paralysis by analysis state that would, in fact, just cause you to sit on the sidelines and let a lot of good deals pass you for the sake of your own nerves. So while I think it's good to spend time thinking about what went wrong previously and how not to do that, I don't think it's a good idea to sit on the sidelines, wait for something to happen or anything like that. And one of the things that we do because of that, because I know that some of the investors that I talked to that lost everything were ones that misused lines of credit. So because of that, we are extraordinarily careful on how we utilize lines of credits. Amazing. I have to look at money different. We were wrong. I thought, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is fun. Would you advise purchasing? Oh, wow. We're at 104 people. That's awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming on here. This is really cool. Let's see here. Well, I've got 100 people on. Let's see. There's the Ingram rental calculator app that's available in both the Android store and the Apple app store, whatever you want to call it. That is what I use to analyze all of our rental properties, and I'm a huge fan of it. It's free. It doesn't keep any of your information. It's just a gift to all the people that want to start investing in real estate. I have no way to make money off that. I think I advertise on a little banner at the bottom, like the mastermind group that we do, and also the PropStream affiliate link that I have, because I think PropStream is a great software. Those are the only two things on there. Otherwise, it's a free app. Well, it's a free app. It's just that's the banner that rolls across it. Would you advise purchasing and rehabbing of the 100-year-old homes? I see so many in Dayton. We've got a lot of them. Yeah. Again, purchase price plus rehab costs has to equal 75% or less of that after repair value. And it's as simple as that. Depending on where you're talking about in Dayton, I mean, I would be really, really skeptical of the properties that were built in like 1895 on like First Street. West First Street. I think there's one on the market right now for like 32 grand. I wouldn't be interested in something like that. We've got a couple of properties that old, and people just kind of get frustrated with the way that the floors slope. I mean, the house is settled. It's really old. It's not going anywhere. It's a sound house. It's just, you can't play a game of marbles on the floor. And, people aren't necessarily designed to live on uneven floors. It's a very unnatural feeling. So I understand it. Um, but fundamentally, I think the houses were built really well. If they've stood that long, then they can go a lot further. If you talk to some people in other markets, like out where Tolu is in Texas, a lot of people are leery of properties built before 1970s. I do not have that feeling whatsoever. We have one property that we are renovating at the moment that is the most sturdy house I've ever been in. It's a brick and block building. It was built in 1875, maybe 1875 or 1885. And I actually took all my kids to it, and I had, I think, three of them jumping up and down on the second floor, and like nothing was moving, nothing was shaking. It's a really sound house. A lot of Dayton's housing stock is really old, but I think a lot of Dayton was built when craftsmanship was like at its peak. So a lot of these homes are built so well. If you go, up Main Street, up Salem, up Riverside, and you start getting into these areas that were developed in like the 20s and 30s, then all of the homes are on 8, 9 foot basements. Uh, they're very solid all around. I think the biggest things to worry about in these older Dayton homes are knob and tube wiring with blown in insulation, right? Don't do that. But there's a couple areas, again, like I said, West First, those older homes. I'm not familiar with like the home quality in all of the areas, but again, up Salem, up Main, up Riverside, especially out in like Dayton View Triangle, those homes are over 100 years old, and they're gonna last for another 300 years. They're solid. I wouldn't have any hesitation. I already gave it to you. It's right here. How to wholesale homes with mortgages? I don't know, Andrea Cross. I'm not a wholesaler. Never done any of that. Um, it shouldn't change anything. If you get a property, I mean, the mortgage has to be paid off at the time of closing. So it shouldn't affect anything. If there's a mortgage on the property, then just make sure that you're able to sell the property for more than the mortgage is. You'll be good. Keep up the great work. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you. I really appreciate it. All right, we've got 100 people on. We've been going for about 2 hours. Any questions that you have, feel free to put those in the chat. We've been posting the clips of the questions that have been asked here, and I think those are really, really helpful. That way, sitting through this 2-3 hour stream isn't for everybody. So I would definitely say that I'm a fan of those clips. I hope you are as well. Watching all of those and liking them when you see them definitely helps out the channel. I am going to make a valiant effort this year to grow the channel to 100,000 subscribers just by posting a lot of these clips on a daily basis and just constantly keep the fresh content coming out and interacting in fun ways. I have a fantastic, well, I think I've had a fun time. So on the YouTube community section, I started posting some polls, and I've had a bunch of fun seeing those roll in. Let's see. I put a poll a couple days ago that said, would you rather have multifamilies or single families And the vast majority of you said that you would rather have multifamilies. So it was 38% single family homes and 62% multifamily. And then a couple days ago as well, I asked, when are you planning to get into real estate? 37% are already in. Another 37% said 0 to 6 months. 21% said 1 to 3 years, and then 5% said 5 years out. So it seems like, 37 plus 37, 74% of the people that responded out of 107 votes are already in or are about to make the move. So congrats to those two crowds. And then to the 21% that's 1 to 3 years out, great job on all the planning. I have a lot of these polls scheduled, and I'm really looking forward to start going over those. We have a really fun game of Would You Rather coming up. Just so you know, the next one it's gonna post tomorrow is, would you rather buy a turnkey property with no occupant or a property with a long-term tenant? Really looking forward to seeing these as we have those fun polls go out on a daily basis. Just a fun way to interact and keep everybody engaged and having a good time. Need a video editor? I'm available. Well, I actually have one now. A little too late. A little too late, love. Yeah, so he's been doing a great job. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff scheduled all the way through like a week from today. So he's been doing a great job at putting those out. Let's see. Let me go through some other questions while we don't necessarily have any questions in. Okay, this is a good one. So, as I post a lot of the properties that we purchase and as I share the purchase prices, one of the main questions that I get is about loans on properties with a low value. And this is not that this is not that hard to answer, but there are banks out there that are willing to give loans on properties that have an extraordinarily low value. The second property that we purchased, I had a $21,000 loan on that, and I got it from one of the local credit unions. So I think the larger banks that you deal with are the ones that are going to have a higher loan to value that they have to see. So they have like a minimum $70,000 loan amount. I've seen as high as a minimum $140,000 loan amount. So at one point, as if you're a real estate investor investing in a kind of a depressed market or one that just has lower property values, then the bigger box banks aren't going to be your friends. You're really going to want to go out and find some local credit unions, some small regional banks. Huntington Bank has done a couple for us. They're a larger regional bank, but they're still local enough and small enough to do that. And then other than that, I would say that we have probably one or two loans with just about every single local credit union here in the area. So the smaller the bank, the more familiar that bank is with the area, the better when it comes to getting loans on low property value investment properties. I think that's about as easy as it gets. And I often share that just as I'm out here feverishly looking for new properties to purchase, my brother is just as feverishly looking for lenders to work with us and ones that are interested in our business model and what exactly it is that we're doing. And because it's the financing piece is very important and each lender kind of makes their own rules, we definitely keep an eye out. And as we are buying properties, we have sometimes molded our buying criteria to fit certain banks. And when I say that, I can think offhand that we have about at this point 10 or 15 properties that we have purchased specifically to fit one bank's kind of lending requirements. because they want, over $100,000 property values, and they're able to give like a better offering. So, kind of figuring out, getting a feel for banks and figuring out what best fits their program, and then figuring out how to build your business model or a part of your business model into their lending things, just to make it a very frictionless interaction, I think is a solid deal. Otherwise, with these local credit unions, these low property valued homes, it's completely possible. However, uh, it's a really tough thing to scale. So if you're looking to buy, more than 10 or 15 of these, then you're likely going to have to get pretty creative. One of the lenders that we regularly refinance big packages of properties with, we kind of make sure that we have a good mixture of properties that we've purchased for 30,000, properties that we've purchased for 80, 90, and hopefully the average is higher than their like $75,000 minimum loan amount per property. So there are some creative ways that you can do it, but as you're in the beginning, as you're just buying 25, 45, $50,000 properties, your best bet is to start forming relationships with each of like the commercial lenders, or just like the mortgage loan officers of these smaller local credit unions. And one of the things that you're going to want to make sure of at these local credit unions is that they're going to keep them in their portfolio. If they're going to try to sell them to the Fannie Freddie loans, then they're going to have a much more strict criteria that they're going to have to hit in order to sell those over. So they're going to be able to make more decision. They're going to be able to operate in a little bit more of a gray area, and they're going to be able to help you out a little bit more if they're holding that loan in their personal portfolio. Now, one of the reasons that scaling this isn't always the easiest is a lot of these smaller credit unions, when they hold things in their portfolio, they don't want to have too big of an exposure on any one individual. So one of the smaller banks that we work with, they have a maximum loan amount of $300,000 to any one individual at the bank. So as soon as we had $300,000 of property financed with them, we couldn't get any additional loans for them, no matter how good the deal was. So one of my favorite sayings is, "He who has the gold makes the rules." And with banks, that could not be more true. Each bank has its own rules. Each bank is willing to make its own exceptions. Each bank is willing to operate in its own gray area. And as somebody that's interested in building up a community, from stabilizing and improving these lower valued homes and getting loans on them, you're definitely going to want to get creative, get understanding of these local credit unions and what their guidelines are and how to operate inside of those. Are you still in the insurance business? Yes. We have a couple of people that run that though. Yes, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, thanks. How do you evaluate your risk threshold on homes that need some rehab work, and how much time do you put into a home versus hiring professionals? That's a good question. So, risk threshold on homes that need rehab work. I don't really know what that means. How much time do you put into a home? Not any. I don't. I don't do any of the work. I've never been a handy fella. There have been a couple of times where my son and I have gone in and did things like paint, maybe a little light flooring, but that's just as we've had the time to do it. We purchase all of our properties um, with the numbers ran. So we borrow 100% of the purchase price plus the rehab cost. So as we're walking through a property, we're determining how much money is needed on that particular property. And then we are setting aside those funds to hire some contractors to go in and do it. So we have a decent relationship with contractors, ones that we use regularly. And, you know, as long as they have the time to do it, then we pay the professionals to do it. Risk threshold, we're willing to take on anything so long as the numbers work. And I would challenge everybody and their thought on risk outside of outside of like when you're analyzing a property. Like there's no real risk in a single family home. I think when people say risk as it relates to rehab are things that are unknown, things that you didn't see that weren't uh, kind of expected. But I struggle to see it as risk when it can be fixed and when that mistake can be amortized over 30 years. It makes it a really low risk. So if everything on the house can be fixed for a particular price, then it just becomes it's not risk so much as it's just a financial thing that needs to be solved. It's just a math problem that needs to be worked out. So I've got a good one. One second. So I think a good example of this is so I would like to summarize everything that I just said as a blanket statement of there aren't any red flags, there aren't any risks when you're looking at a property. The appropriate formula to judge every new acquisition off of is purchase price plus rehab costs equals 75% or less of the after repair value. So it doesn't matter what kind of condition the house is in, so long as it fits that formula. If it has a foundation issue that needs $50,000 to fix, then if that's the only thing, and because of that, it's worth 200,000, but they're willing to sell it for 100,000, then that makes it worthwhile. That's a very good purchase for you. Now add in all the other types of deferred maintenance against it, then that's just going to need to enter that formula. So the biggest mistake that we've made so far in real estate investing was with one property where we accidentally completely overlooked the fact that this property was condemned for lead-based paint. So the county had it posted. I should have seen it as I walked through. That nobody could live there until all of the lead had been remediated appropriately. So we purchased this property for 45,000, and we had budgeted about $15,000 for this property because that's all it really needs. But because it has been condemned, they want all of the interior to be encapsulated by somebody that's certified to do the lead-based paint remediation. In addition, instead of just encapsulating the exterior, windows and siding, they want the siding completely replaced and all of the windows completely replaced, also by a lead-based paint certified contractor. So the property would likely appraise for 120,000, perhaps, and that's probably on the high end. Maybe 100,000. The market's just increasing at the moment so quick; it's really tough to point that down. But we recently got a batch of appraisals back, and a lot of properties in similar condition appraised for about 120,000. Before this, I was estimating the value of the property to be about 90,000. So let's just work with that because that's the numbers that I originally knew and used when I was classifying this as a really big mistake. So we purchased the property for 45,000. We expected to be worth 90,000. We expected to put 15 into it. So we were really close to that 75% after repair value. Now, after getting that new information about the property being condemned for lead-based paint, we reached out to the appropriate contractor that was certified and all the appropriate things. He's been in communications with the county that is requiring all of this work, and our total bill for that property is going to be 56,000. Now, since the time we purchased the property and since now, we also need to put an $8,000 roof on the property. So 56,000 plus that $8,000 roof. Now we're at 64,000 plus the $45,000 purchase price. So we're at 109,000 on a $90,000 home. So if you take the $90,000 times 0.75, we have the ability to pull out 67,500 of that, which is going to leave us $41,500 difference that we have to leave into that property rather than pull it out. Now, since the market has increased, I think we're going to get lucky. I think the 75% of 120,000 is 90,000. So if we're able to pull out 90,000 from that property, then that means we only have 19,000 that we're leaving into that property. In addition, as soon as we transfer this to that long-term financing, it's going to be amortized over 30 years. So all that to say, if it's a cash flowing asset that you plan on keeping long-term, the property is going to continue to appreciate. You're going to continue paying down the principal. You're able to amortize that mistake. And over the next 20, 30 years, you're going to be fine. So long as the property is well maintained and you don't defer any of the future maintenance. If you keep good people that want to take care of the property in it and try to minimize your risk of putting in someone that's going to tear up the property by doing some annual inspections or semi-annually inspections, then I think you're going to be good. And worst case scenario, it's an asset that your kids won't profit from, but maybe your kids' kids will. How did you find trustworthy contractors? What is your vet process? So that's a really tough one. I mean, I think that there's a video of a clip that I posted not long ago answering this, probably in a little bit more detail than I can right now. Being about 2 hours in, my brain's starting to get a little fuzzy, but starting off, giving a contractor a small job is best, and kind of feeling them out, seeing how promptly they come out, how quickly they get the job done. And hopefully on that small job that you give them, there's a mistake that's made and you have to ask them to come back out and fix it. And depending on how they do at coming back out and fixing it will tell you a lot about the character and the work ethic and the prioritization that contractor places on your project. And if all of those things turn out well, then you can start giving them larger jobs and trust them with more until they prove you otherwise, which hopefully they don't. So, I think like any other relationship, it takes a lot of time and a lot of trial and error. And there's no real scalable way to do it without getting taken advantage of from time to time, as unfortunate as that is. All right. Any questions that you guys might have? More than happy to answer. I'm going to give it a few minutes. And other than that, I think I might head on over to the title company and get closing on these 3 properties. Let me see if we have highlighted any of these additional questions. So one question that I get a lot from people that I know that have reached out to me outside of the channel, not one that I get common on the channel, but it's how to negotiate in property investing. And I think that the best answer for that is just to reiterate the fact that the appropriate formula to buy real estate investments are the purchase price plus the rehab costs being equal to or less than 75% of that after repair value. So even if you have to kind of guard yourself against getting emotionally attached to a property or convinced that this would be a good first investment for you. So if it doesn't fit that formula, you need to really look at your underlying reasons for wanting that property. And you don't want to get too caught up in it um, at first, because you really need to hold yourself accountable to that formula. If you can purchase properties that fall in line with the purchase price plus renovations uh, is equal to or less than 75% of that after repair value, then you're going to have a very long and successful future ahead of you of investing in real estate. So whenever let's just for even numbers say a property is worth $100,000. If you just from off the top using that formula, you can't pay more than $75,000 for that house. This is automatically going to disqualify so many properties that are listed that come your way. And a lot of properties that have no deferred maintenance, have been well maintained, that have no issues, they demand the full market value, especially when it's an owner occupied property marketed to another owner occupant. However, there are a lot of times, and since single family homes are owned by everybody, a variety of people that need places to live, there's always stories and situations that make an owner of a property okay with selling a property at 75% of its full market value, because they just don't want to go through the hassle of realtors or showings or negotiations or making repairs. That's just not something they're interested in doing. So if you negotiate and if you hold yourself strictly to that formula, then if this property is immaculate, that's worth $100,000, the most you can pay for it is 75,000. Now you can say if this property needs a roof and that's going to cost 8,000, then you can't pay any more than, I set myself up for that one. 75 minus 8,000, 65. Yeah, no, 67, 67,000. So now you're at 67,000 that you can't pay. You can't pay more than that for that property because of that $8,000 roof. So anything less than $67,000, if that's the only issue, is a deal and you should purchase it. Now, if you add painting the exterior or painting the interior, you just need to subtract that appropriate amount of money towards it. So whenever I figure this out, I will counter with whatever I have come up with. And I will be very transparent with that formula if asked. And I'll explain that. And on a surprising number of times, people agree that all that work needs to be done. That is, in fact, a fair price for that repair. And they will end up selling the property for that. It's not contingent on them. It puts no stress on them. I'll do all the work. This is just the numbers that I have to work with. So if while I have had people tell me thanks for like all that they've learned about negotiating in real estate from watching me and listening to me, I do not consider myself to be good at negotiating these offers or deals. I just have that formula and I stick to it, and I do my best to not get discouraged if the deal doesn't work out. And knowing that that is such a strict formula, then there are going to be a lot of properties that I either offer on and don't get, or properties that just don't fit that formula. So a better skill than negotiating a particular property would be one of persistence and discipline, to always be looking for deals, always be analyzing and offering on deals, rather than sinking your teeth into one and just trying to negotiate it into being a good deal. Now, you can get some great deals that way, but I would say by and large, Just knowing that formula, using it, and running off that is your best option. Hey, I like the sound of that. Paul Maskill, what's up, man? Going on 2 hours strong with 64 people. This is really impressive. I think 104 is the biggest number that I saw. I'm pretty pumped, pretty ecstatic. When I first started doing these live streams, I never really thought that 100 people would show up. So the fact that we hit that today leaves me very encouraged, especially um, after just putting in some effort to dice these live streams up into some bite-sized pieces and release those throughout the week. Clearly, I think that's working really well. I don't know the entire story behind how all 62 of you have arrived at this live stream today, but I'm super thankful for all of you here and having a ton of fun doing this. Let's see. Any other questions? Well, it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's a long one. I'll give it a couple more minutes and I'll keep looking over these questions to see if I have the ability to answer these pretty quickly. Here's a good one that I can answer really quick, and that is about how to calculate real estate rehab costs. And unfortunately, this answer varies based on, or the actual costs vary based on where you're at in the world and what you're trying to get done. So, labor costs vary tremendously based on the cost of living in that area. Materials Material costs varies depending on how difficult it is to get material to that location. But I would say that contractors generally have their own method of calculating the rehab costs. And one of the best things that you can do as a real estate investor, whether you are just starting out or whether you have a decent portfolio already, is forming great relationships with contractors. And if you find a contractor that really enjoys working with real estate investors, then a large reason for that is just because of the ease of working with investors, because the expectations going from a owner occupied property to an investor are just drastically different. And depending on the type of personality that contractor has, perhaps he prefers dealing with investors and the problems that come along working with investors over the owner occupied properties and the kind of retail rehab costs. So if you've got an investor or a contractor that loves working with investors, I would definitely take that contractor out to lunch a couple times, maybe for a couple drinks, and get them to give you kind of the shorthand of how they calculate, what they think it's going to take, what they prefer to get paid for, just kind of like a cookie cutter kitchen, bathroom. And then just start. If you think your average home size is going to be about 1,000 square foot in your area, if that's what a lot of the investment properties are, then just start getting some ideas about how they calculate square footage for flooring. We use about $4 per square foot when we are estimating flooring costs. Some contractors have a quick way to calculate how much painting would cost and figure out how to do that and get some shorthand, and definitely start building your network of contractors, interviewing them, asking them, your local ones that work in your market that are interested in working with investors, and figure out how they analyze these things and come up with those costs. I have found some investors suggest using kind of like the replacement cost calculators that insurance companies and some of these larger contracting firms use. And I just find those to be extraordinarily high, and they will likely throw off all of the numbers as you are analyzing properties, and you would just be way off. So I would highly recommend finding a group of these contractors, as many as you can, and just kind of pick their brains. Don't take too much advantage of their time because they're not making money if they aren't actively working. So either on their off time or by compensating them somehow, have them help you get a rundown for estimating those things. Just off the top of my head, I know that we generally do about $5,000 to $7,000 for a kitchen, about $3,000 for a bathroom, about $4 per square foot of flooring, and we hope for $5,000 to $8,000 for a roof. But given how many layers of roofing and if it needs to be redecked or not, that price can go as high as to 13 to 18,000. 18,000 is the most expensive roof that we've done so far, but that was on like a 3,000 square foot house that had a lot of layers, cedar shake shingles, and it needed all new decking. So it was like the worst of all possible roofs. So costs vary greatly, and this is one of those unfortunate things that you are going to get better at with experience, but it's really difficult to jump in without leveraging the experience of others, uh, which would be those contractors that you trust. If you don't have any contractors, but your community has an area that has like real estate investor meetups, you can start there. You can talk to other investors and figure out how they kind of shorthand repair costs as they're walking through properties, because these investors are likely going to use the same contractors or the same kind of circle of contractors as you and will end up using as well. Paul Hamgatcher. What's up, man? What's your ratio of a market to off-market deals that you purchase? Let's see. We currently have, I can tell you our current. We currently have 13 properties under contract. Of these, let me see how many came off the MLS. So of the 13, 6 of those came from the MLS. So those were just on market. And then the other 7 were off market from either realtors that haven't posted them yet or wholesalers. Right now, I would say it's pretty as even as 7 can be. So I'd say about 4 of those came from a wholesaler that we've worked with a good bit, and 3 of those came from a realtor that it was off market, but it was listed on the MLS, just listed as pending, because I agreed to purchase it before it was listed. Thanks. 66 people on, 64. Man, it's almost 2.5 hours in. I kind of hate to end this because it was such a good turnout. I really appreciate everybody that was on this live stream. I've been looking forward to this all week. I appreciate you being out here. Next Friday, same time, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard, I'll be right here answering some questions, any of them that you have. In the meantime, feel free to keep watching those clips, like them as they come out. That helps because I've got my sights set. I'm going to try to grow this thing to 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So thank you all for all that you do, and keep going out there focused on building generational wealth and existing apart from the system that is that 9 to 5 every day, saving for 30 years to maybe achieve financial freedom. So keep going out there, analyzing deals, buying properties, and building generational wealth. And I will see you all next week.